Welcome in, Rob Wright's Genetics Pop Culture. And today we are talking about episode 3 of Band of Brothers. And with us, as always, is Heather. How are you today, Heather?
Doing great, Rob. How are you?
Doing fine.
Yeah.
Hey, thank
Happy
you
Super
guys
Bowl
so much
Sunday.
for watching. I know SP4H is in the chat. Hopefully, other people will make it to the chat. I know we had kind of a late start. I apologize for that. That's my fault. I've had some fun internet connection issues. And as we know, they are so much fun to deal with. Isn't technology wonderful?
Yes, internet gremlins again.
Yes, yes. Internet
Yeah,
gremlins.
yeah.
Yeah,
You do.
they're not in the car; they're in the internet, and just about every other appliance you can think of. All
Uh,
right, so we have episode 3, Carentan, which is a little bit more unique. This episode starts a trend of a couple of episodes that we're going to see here that kind of really focus in on one certain character rather than the whole group. I think we've got a string of like 4 or 5 where it does that. Heather coming up. So I overall, I think we'll give our impressions of this one, but I think this one's got some good stuff in it. But I think it's one of the weaker episodes, to be honest. What are your initial thoughts?
yeah, just because of the character that they focus on and how he's treated, I think that kind of makes it one of the weaker episodes. I generally like that format, right, where we've been kind of introduced to a lot of Easy Company, and then we start to focus more on individuals as it goes through, as we get to know them. But this character wasn't introduced earlier, so it's a little bit out of the blue. And I feel like there's a lot of good things in this episode too, like the way they show the Battle of Carentan, and then after that. But yeah, this particular character, I think, is what makes it weak.
Yeah, I think so too. But we're going to get into that. We're also going to talk, it focuses on Blythe, and we're going to talk about him within the episode. And at the very end of the stream, towards the end, we'll talk about what really happened to him because unfortunately, uh, they didn't really treat him very favorably uh, at the end of the episode because what had happened, just to give just an overview, is Ambrose got all his data for this wonderful book from the actual men, and the men didn't know what happened to Blythe after he went to the hospital. So, spoiler alert, we'll tell you what happened to Blythe, and we'll tell you all about what happened and what he did. But let's talk about the plot summary. Heather, do you happen to have that up? Do you want to read it?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So the episode Carentan takes its name from the town of Carentan in Normandy, France, which was a strategic objective for the Allied forces following the D-Day landings. The capture of Carentan was crucial as it would enable the Allies to link the Utah and Omaha beachheads, thus consolidating their foothold in Normandy. Easy Company's next objective is to take the town of Carentan, where they engage in street to street fighting with a doggedly determined enemy. The fighting is hard and there are many casualties. Having pushed the Germans out, Easy Company now has to hold the position and soon face a counterattack from German forces, including artillery and tanks. For Private Albert Blythe, the pressure and stress pushes him to the breaking point. He even suffers from hysterical blindness, but soon recovers with few words of encouragement from Captain or from Lieutenant Winters. After 36 days in battle, Easy Company is finally relieved and get to return to their base in England.
Yeah, this is an interesting episode and interesting tactics. So, where we were was they took the Burkhardt Manor, and when they were first into Normandy, Easy Company, before going to Carentan, is really protecting. This is from the book. They're really protecting the main headquarters, the main staff of the unit at first for the first couple of days, and then they ordered them into Carentan. Carentan was key so that you could link up both beaches. And let's talk about some of the main characters in here. We talked a little bit about Blythe. Blythe is introduced, and you get to see him kind of from when he landed in Normandy to how he kind of regroups with the others. And his story is the focal point of this, and dealing with his fear and how he deals with that and the other characters he interacts with. What are some of the other characters that you'd like to talk about, Heather?
Yeah, so there's Blythe, and I did want to make a note too right away that anything that I'm saying about him is not about the real person at all, because I feel like maybe these other men didn't know him that well, or he wasn't really part of kind of the group of them that had more camaraderie. I feel like what my criticisms are of the way the actor portrayed him and the way that the director had him portrayed, which I don't think is probably 100% fair. Other characters, Lieutenant Welsh, who we had been briefly introduced to in the last 2 episodes. I think we really get to see him, more in this episode, and I like how we get to see more of his style as a leader. He's another great leader, but a little bit different than Winters, who is kinda more, like, contemplative and intellectual. Lieutenant Welsh is just kind of a straightforward, no BS, just get right to it. I like him a lot. Luz is great again in this one with his comic relief, impersonations and jokes. Perconti is hilarious with all his collecting of the watches, and he's kind of the realist, I think, too, of the group and the complainer a little bit, like always complaining, like, "Oh, why are we always the ones, having to do this?" And a little bit of comic relief as well, but also kind of a realist. Sergeant Martin is in there. He's pretty laid back. Spears, we see his legend continue to grow and his kind of take no prisoners attitude. Malarkey, I love the development that we get all along in these episodes from Malarkey. He just starts out as just more, I don't know, maybe more innocent, more goofy in the first episode, and episode by episode, I think we see the most change in him, as he's affected by what happens in all these.
Mhm.
Winters, again, I mean, we continue to see his leadership and a little bit different tact in this episode, I think we see. Um, and then if I also wanted to mention Eugene Rowe, who's the medic, and this is the first
Mhm.
time that we see him. We'll get a lot more on him later, but this is kind of our first introduction. And then I know Hubler figures into this, and maybe you have something to mention about him. He's in the episode, but his personality just never really comes across as distinct to me in the show. And I don't know if you have any info from him on the book. From
I
the book.
do from the book and from the show. Remember, Hubler's the one that wanted to take point right away. So he's kind of the gun ho guy. He's
Okay.
also the one that you'll hear the him talk. All these guys, we saw Malarkey go do this foolishly last week, but Hubler always wanted to get the Luger.
Yes.
And we'll see what happens later on when he actually gets the Luger. Doesn't go as well, but Hoopler is the type, and it mentions this in the book. Like I said, folks, go get the book. It's a good read. If you love the show, it's a good companion to the show, and it'll give you a little bit more insights in the man. But Hoopler basically was the gun ho guy, wanted to be out in front, hey, let's go get him. That rah rah guy that was always trying to be out in front and always trying to lead point and everything else. And so it was interesting, particularly at the ending of this episode where Blythe takes point instead of Hoopler, which was
Yeah.
interesting. So
Yeah.
uh, we'll point that out. And I've got more about that in the book, and that's where it really mentions Blythe in the book. The the book really isn't about Blythe. They just took his snippet of story and added it
Mhm.
on here. Um, but as we get into the slides and stuff, let's go and talk about the opening because I love the opening to these episodes because it always deals with the real men of Easy Company. It doesn't always tell you who they are until the end, but it was interesting what they said about fear. And one of the big themes was that, hey, everybody was scared. They just handled it differently. Some guys said, hey, you kind of just sucked it up and moved on. Some of them just said, hey, I've been trained. Let's go. Others had some other things. Were there any notes that you took about the men and what they said about fear?
Yeah, I really liked how they introduced this episode, talking with them talking about fear because the episode is really about fear and how people deal with it differently. And
Mhm.
they unfortunately chose Blythe to kind of represent all of the fear, as far as the some of the worst, a way that was not well dealt with. But I think, there's kind of everyone has like a fight, flight, or freeze reaction, and the military they've shown before is like trying to train that out of them so that they're just focusing on doing the task that they're supposed to be doing and not kind of thinking about the fear. But, you definitely see Blythe represent the freeze of that, and I like what you said and the men said in the beginning, right? Everyone's scared. It's just different processing and different ways of dealing with it, and you get Spears kind of giving another speech about it too, later on, and I think
Mhm.
part of it too that struck me was that some like, the ones that seemed to be okay were the ones that they thought that they had no hope of surviving, which I thought was odd. Even one of the men in the opening says, "I just thought I'd be killed instantly." To whereas if you're thinking, "How am I gonna survive?" Maybe that leads to the freezing, like, the
Mhm.
thinking about it. If you just assume, like, I'm probably not gonna make it, then, and that was a theme that kinda ran throughout this episode too, which I found interesting.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Bill Garner, who said that everybody was scared. It's just that he didn't think he was going to live past D-Day +1, so he would gear himself up like it's his last day on Earth, and that way that adrenaline pushed through the fear. Other guys, one of the guys mentioned in this that he had fear in the back of his mind, but he could think through it, and he was a thinker, and so he was strategic to be able to think through it. It's really interesting because I mean, we think of the heroes and these brave soldiers going off to fight a war, and they're ready to do just about anything, which they are, but at the same time, they're human beings. And
Mhm.
I think of myself in that situation. How would I react? I don't know if I could say that I truly would be out without fear myself, but I would hope that I would be trained enough. And one of the things that Bill Garnier said that they were trained for 2 years on how to really deal with that, and so they
Right,
knew how to process through it. There's an old quote from one of my favorite movie stars, John Wayne, that says, "Courage is being scared to death but saddling up anyway," and
right.
that's very true.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, if you
the
weren't afraid, you wouldn't need courage, right? I mean, it's
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
And I think, one of the things that I want to translate in lessons of life that we learn from these men and we can learn about ourselves is that, you know, um, there is fear out there. There's fear of the unknown. There are all kinds of things that we're going to come up with in our lives. But sometimes you have to rely on training. You have to rely on friends. You have to rely on other things to help you out. The other aspect of it is that, sometimes you can't take the next step until you've been in a situation for a little while,
right.
which I see in a lot of our society. Everybody's jumping quickly to the next level or the next thing, or they're quick to give up. And sometimes you have to be in the weeds and learn and train and grow a little bit. And I don't know if you find that in your life. I find it in my life and work life and everything else. What about you, Heather?
Absolutely, everything takes time, and I
Mhm.
think you can kinda see that, and I think their training was like 2 years, and
Mhm.
the planning of this action was very long and slow, and yeah, that we live in now like an instant gratification society where everything should happen instantly instead of, taking the time to really learn things and grow in something. So, yeah, definitely. I know for me, um I'd probably hide in a hole regardless of how much training I had. I mean, if like, I don't think I could run straight into machine gun fire, I'd be like, no, sir, I'll go back that way. I think the only motivator would be not would be your loyalty to the guys that you were with because you have a bond with them. And I could see
Mhm.
fighting like if anyone I loved was threatened or my family was threatened, it would be difficult to get motivated though to just fight for something externally that I didn't have, that I didn't believe in. Let's say I'd find it very difficult. So, yeah, interesting. SP4H in the chat says the rah-rah guys in the service are generally the annoying guy in the unit. I think that's
Yeah,
Hubler, right?
probably Hubler. And then he also says fear causes hesitation, and hesitation will cause your worst fears to come true. Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you can see that in life. If you get if you let fear just kind of overtake you, that happens in life. And that's a life lesson that you can take
Mhm.
from some of these things. And it's not something that everybody's willing to talk about. But that's I think that's how we get over it, how we understand and how we grow. And that's part of the other problem is that people like hold their fears and hold things back inside when if you'd have a conversation and talk through them with somebody or somebody you trust, you'd find that, hey, wait a minute, I'm not that different from somebody else, or I might have the same
Right,
fears. Or,
right,
hey, I don't think that at all about you, or I don't think that at all about you. And you might gain confidence from that.
right.
So,
Keep
um,
moving forward. Keep
yeah,
expanding what you're doing. Don't just kind of freeze and get stuck.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Always reach out. Always reach out if you can. And that's, why we have several communities and several people that we reach out to. So, all right,
Mhm.
let's get in the rest of this episode. Let me bring on the slides and see what we've got here. Uh, Folks, I think I did a better job of getting the slides. There's some slides on the Carentan, the actual invasion of the city that don't quite match, but we're kind of opening up on Blythe here, and he's kind of looking at another paratrooper that got caught in in a tree, and you see kind of the rest of you guys finding him. Was kind of interesting. I mean, we're introduced to Blood, and we're introduced to the rest of these guys on D-Day, and their conversation is, "Hey, who's that? He looks like what's his name?"
Yeah. Well, that's what I wondered too, if some of the poor portrayal of him in this episode is the fact that the other men were not that close to him originally. And so, because I know they got a lot of their information from the men directly about
Mhm.
what happened, and I just hate the way he's portrayed in here because he's a real person, and he obviously went on, to do things that he wasn't just an idiot or just wasn't just frozen the whole time, but he's kind of portrayed in here as just, you know, pretty dumb, honestly, and just kind of in a daze the whole time, and I really think that it would have been better if the actor would have portrayed him as normal in some of the moments where they weren't in battle, they weren't under fire, instead of like, just being like, wandering around in a daze the whole time. So, yeah, I mean, I get they're trying to show fear, but you wouldn't be in constant fear for days at a time, right? It, it would be in moments where that would happen, and I don't know. I don't like the way he's shown in this.
No, and even here, um, they're like, hey, we lost our unit, and everybody was scattered and stuff like that. And so, I would have thought that, hey, whoa, I finally found some guys
Right.
that know where easy is. Let's go.
Right, like,
Um,
wake up a little bit. The funniest line is or the funniest scene is, they ask him, what happened, on D-Day, and Blythe says, "Oh, man, I missed the DMZ," and,
yeah.
Perconte just looks at him like, "Yeah, no shit, we all did," like, they're all looking at him like he's a complete idiot, so yeah, this is funny too, all the collecting of souvenirs, and,
Oh yeah,
Picante's got, like, a watch thing, like he's,
yeah. Here, let me.
some shady salesman out on the
Yeah, he's
street.
got like 6 watches.
Yeah, he's, like, pulling him off of bodies. It's pretty funny. He's
Yeah,
great
and
in this episode.
this is where Hubler mentions when I get that Luger. It's in the background. You can hear it. They make more of it in another episode, but yeah, he's talking about that, and they're looking at all the different stuff. So it's portrayed a little bit different. They did regroup right here. This is basically like right after Burkhart Manor and everything else. Um, and he's back in the first platoon. But there was a time in between when they were kind of defending the kind of the headquarters when they were setting up for a couple of days. And unfortunately, the men did find the alcohol in kind of the towns and the scattered villages out there.
I'm
And
sure.
apparently, Welsh got a little bit too drunk and was sitting in the middle of the street. And Winters was yelling at him, get back here, because they had a little bit of sniper fire. And so he didn't hear him at all because he was so drunk. And so Winters had to go grab him and pull him back to save his life.
Wow.
And it talks about that in the book. And it's just like, oh my gosh.
Oh, that's
Wow.
funny. So I can
Yeah.
imagine, like, after D-Day, if I had gone through that and then I found a bottle of anything, I'd probably be drinking because you'd be so stressed.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know?
Well, I mean, even Winters takes a drink. It was the
Yeah.
first drink, it says in the book, it's the first drink he ever had.
Yeah. Oh, I can believe it. This is and so, yeah, it feels like there's a couple days, right? Because everything's gotta get on the beach, you've gotta get communications. I'm sure, like, the leadership is coming
Mhm,
in afterwards. They're establishing
mhm.
whatever kind of base and communication, so it's gonna take a little while to kind of regroup and get on to the next thing.
Yeah, and there's Picani and his watches,
It's so funny.
which I think is cool. And there's Hubler, who's gonna take
Yeah,
point, and
I
so
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so they get the mission to go take the town of Carentan, and, so, Welsh so Winters is in command of Easy Company, Welsh is in command of 1st platoon, 2nd platoon is actually, what's his name? Another lieutenant. Come on. What's Buck Compton? And
Okay.
then 3rd platoon. I don't know who the 3rd platoon leader is, but they're all heading out. So 1st platoon, Blythe is in 1st platoon, and Hubler's taking point there. For Connie's in 1st platoon as well. And Luz has one of my favorite lines of the thing. They're quoting the general who said, "Hey, give me 3 days of fighting, and you'll be relieved."
Right.
And then the other thing is they mentioned about flies, but really it was mosquitoes. Mosquitoes were horrendous, and I'll tell you a little bit
Oh,
more about them as we go. It's
I
in the
bet
book.
they were. But
Oh,
yeah,
they were.
like, flies spread disease, so keep yours closed.
Yes, yes, that's my favorite. I love that line.
Oh,
Uh,
god.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
that one's
that's
good. He's hilarious.
yeah, and in real life, he was a cut up. So I don't know if he said that, but Buzz in real life was the comedian of the group, and so they're going to take Carentan, and I show this shot. This is the main shot where the sniper is, but so let me kind of explain how this works. So you had Normandy up here, and Carentan was like over here, and you have the two beaches. And the two beaches kind of come together right at Carentan. So the Germans had retreated, but they left a like a squad there to kind of just defend the fort while they go get reinforcements. What had happened is it Normandy wasn't as fortified as some of the other bankheads. They did have what got taken down at Burkhardt Manor, but they didn't have like armor divisions or anything right there on the beaches or in the towns. And so you're getting the Germans bringing the armor in other parts of France closer to here as they're learning of the Allied invasion. Well, we need to take this town because it's so strategic for units uh, to meet and set up and go in to take the rest of France. So you had one unit coming from the north, one unit I think coming from like the east, and then Easy Company went around and came in from the south. So they're on the back end of town coming in, which I think is probably the a little bit harder part to do. And so what happened was you got him up on Carentan. First platoon was supposed to go Welsh's group. He gets them to go, and here we see they start charging, and the machine gun starts firing. And what happens? They get
Yeah,
stuck in the
this
mud.
God, this part is just brutal, and like, okay, taking the guns in the last episode was one thing, but I feel like, you have cover, you can approach it strategically. Like here, they have machine guns set up, firing right at you, and you're expected to run like straight into it. And those like scenes like that, I always find really disturbing because it's like they're just throwing numbers at it, and you've got to be expecting such a high rate of casualties to take something like that. It's just you've got so many numbers coming through it, coming towards it that you're going to start to get through. But yeah, so it's first platoon, right, starts running. So they get kind of up and into cover before the machine gun fire starts, but then it starts really heavy. And second and third platoon just like hit the dirt, get down in the ditch, which is then they're kind of pinned there, right? So you see Winters just screaming at him, like going back. He's standing up in the road, and it's amazing that he didn't get shot because he's screaming like, get up, and like keep moving, and he's pulling him out of the ditch and he's kicking some of them. It's like it's the first time you see him like actually really aggressive, like, like kicking them out of the ditch because they're gonna get pinned there and they're gonna know their location and then, they're just kind of like sitting ducks there. So yeah, that this is an intense scene when they first come into Carentan.
Yeah. And welcome 2104 Dogface. Glad you're here. Glad you could join us and so thankful for your service and your insight. And he mentions, so talking with some of the guys who were there listening to them talk about Winters losing his cool, swearing and kicking them. Yeah, exactly. This is the first time Winters had to kick them, swear at him. It was like, who is this guy now? He just was
But
angry
like
about it. And it says in the book also that so Welsh had gone into town and gone ahead, and he had 6 men with him. So he knew they were sitting ducks
right.
if the rest of the guys didn't come in and help support him to take out that gun. So that's
Right.
why Winters was getting him, get out of the ditch. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think, he had to get him up and out, right? Like,
yeah.
obviously, they're not gonna wanna get up because there's, like, machine guns firing straight at him, but you have to get him up and moving. The
Mhm.
Germans also have mortars, so if they know their position there, they're gonna just fire on all and knock them all out at once, so, yeah, they gotta get up and move forward, so, yeah, that part was rough.
Yeah. Uh, it says 2104 dog faces. Then we had Winters standing there drinking his Pepsi. He said we had men pinned down. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, you see more of the mud, the muck, and Winters trying to get him get up, get going, move. So, but yeah, they had to move in there, and I think he's consoling the guys. Get up, let's go.
Well, first platoon almost had it better, right? Because they get to run up before the machine gun
Mhm.
fire starts, and then they see them, it starts, and then all the rest of the guys are like, "Crap, I'm not gonna keep running. I'm gonna jump,
Yeah,
take cover here," which is, like, gonna be your natural instinct to just get get out of the line of fire.
yeah. So this is Welsh and Luz was the radio man. So Luz was in first platoon along with them. And I love this scene. It's like, where the hell is everybody? I have no
Right,
idea.
right.
And they're getting pinned down with the fire. And finally they take out the machine gunner here. And basically what had happened is you got this unit of Germans. It's not a very big unit of Germans that's in there, but they're in strategic positions in different
Yeah,
houses and different stuff. And I, what happened here is just, gosh, the most intense fighting because they have to go door to door.
yeah,
And that has got to be some of the most difficult stuff because you're right there and you don't, number one, you don't know where they are. Number two, you don't know what's coming at you. So basically, door to door, hand to hand combat, they set them off in groups like two or three, and you throw the grenade in there, it blow up, and then you open the door real quick, and you didn't know, hey, am I going to get shot at right here, or am I going to be able to shoot somebody, or are they going to give up, or they're going to be nobody there? Crazy stuff here.
yeah. It's just so difficult too going through the streets, right? Because they're in the windows with machine guns. They're on the second floor. So they're just shooting down at the people, running through the streets. They're
Hmm.
trying to stay against the walls, but then they start getting the mortar fire too coming in. That's hitting
Hmm.
the buildings. Now you've got like shrapnel from that coming out. Um, I like the scene too with Lipton where he's like spread out because they're all like, bunched together and gonna get picked off.
Oh
These would
yeah,
be so scary though to like try to he's like, "Come on, let's get it going." He's like, gotta open the door to see what's inside and then that family's in there. It's just
yeah.
this whole scene is so intense.
Oh yeah, and this whole battle reminded me of parts of Saving Private Ryan when they were in one of
Right.
the towns as well,
Yeah.
going through it. And they try and save that family. And it's like, the civilians they've got to do that. Um, this is later on after they take it, the guy on the horse trying to relay messages back and forth. But
Oh, it's
um,
cool, how they did a lot of these shots too, right? Where you could just see the muzzle flashes coming out of the doors and the windows when
mhm,
they're showing a view down the street. You could see how much like gunfire is coming out of the doors and windows. This looks like a death alley going into the streets.
yeah. I mean, and they'd have to get up high and take him out up high. And one of the main things, this soldier right here, I can't remember his name. He's the bazooka soldier. He goes into
Mm.
the one room and he's looking for them, and he thinks they're in the outhouse, and he shoots it a
Right.
couple times, and he backs off only to have mortar fire hit him, and
Yeah.
it's just awful what happens to him.
That was
Um,
horrific. Did that actually happen in the book? I think where Leibgott finds him and he's just, like, completely
it,
mutilated.
yeah, it does talk about that, but I don't know if it's Liebgott that actually finds him. But basically, it says that he tried to walk, but they were like, you're not going to be able to because his legs were dangling,
Right.
which is just awful. And
Yeah,
then
that was horrible.
we mentioned Blythe, and we're going to talk about what really happened with him. But this is kind of where he kind of freezes up.
And
And,
here it was understandable, and that's why I wish they would have portrayed his character a little bit better in the beginning or in earlier episodes, and you would have had some sort of connection to him or a little more empathy for him. But you just they when they showed him so goofy through the whole thing, now when he freezes up, you don't really have a good contrast because you
mhm,
could kind of see where someone who wasn't mentally prepared would freeze up in a situation like this.
mhm. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, 2104 Dogface also mentions that each of the guys was limited in the number of the grenades each trooper carries.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There'll be a character that we're introduced to at the end of this episode that apparently he had several bullets and grenades going forward, but we'll talk about that later. Um, Babe Hepron, that's who I'm mentioning, but
Okay, yeah.
we'll talk later on about that. But yeah, I mean, just the street fighting. We do see a scene with one of the the soldiers' shifty powers that we're going to talk about later on in the episodes. But he was one of the best shots in the company, probably in the army at the time. He was a sniper, and there's a point where Shifty kind of just takes out a couple people. Uh,
Yeah. God, it'd be great if you were, like, a great accurate shot. To be a sniper would be a much better position than, some of the other fighting. I mean, this in the city combat looks like by far the worst. I mean, I
yeah,
obviously don't know, but this looks like it would be the toughest to deal with.
yeah. And 2104 Dogface brings up the real Bill Garnier did not like the way Blythe was portrayed in this episode.
Yeah.
Winners didn't like it either. A bunch of the guys didn't like that. Especially with what had happened to him, what truly happened to him, which we'll talk about later. I keep teasing it, but
Yeah. Well, that's
yeah, I don't
good
like the
to
way.
know. That's really good to know that the guys didn't like how he was portrayed either, because
Yeah,
I hate the way he's portrayed in this, and I think that's one of the worst parts of the episode for me is just how he was portrayed because I don't. It just doesn't feel accurate to me. I feel like they just overdid it. You know.
absolutely. The other thing about it was it was just this episode. The one thing about it, and I think it's one of the weaker episodes of the series. It's still like a really good episode compared to most of the stuff that we have out there, but
Oh yeah.
it was the most Hollywoodized, I think,
Yeah.
because they tried too hard to show the fear.
Yes.
Here we see Lipton, and so Lipton had gone up, and he's the first one to see the mortars, and he's telling, get back," and he gets down and he gets blasted, and oh my goodness, what
Yeah.
happened with him? And um, particularly
Yeah.
if you're a guy, there's certain aspects of your body that you definitely want to check and make sure are still functioning
Yeah.
when you get
Oh
like
my
this.
god. He acts this so well too, man. Just the look on his face just says it all right here. He just like, "Oh god, tough."
Yeah. And basically he gets, I think it's Hubler that comes over to him, but I'm not sure if it's Hubler in the book, but he double checks him and said everything's where it should be.
Right.
He gave him some relief, but at the same time, he got hit. One of the things that really happened with Lipton is that his hand got hit, and his hand was kind of he had a couple of difficulty with his hands, had to have like surgery on his hand after
Mhm.
this too, along with his legs. 2104 Dogface says Shifty wasn't a sniper. E Company had no sniper. He was just the best marksman in the company. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You know, you're right because I don't know. Some of the guys have said that he's sniper-esque, I guess, but if they had had a sniper, they probably would have tried to position him more strategically if he was a true sniper, right?
Yeah.
Because you would think if you got a sniper, kind of like in Band of Brothers, they had the one guy who was a sniper, and they would put him up high or get him. Hey, you go here and get high up in the air and give us cover. So you're right. If he was a true sniper, he'd be up high or somewhere else, or they positioned him strategically somewhere else. But he was a good marksman because he's born with a gun in his hand. One of the other things that got mentioned as they kind of approach Carentan and some other things that we forgot to talk about real quick was on the approach. So Easy Company did a lot of the maneuvers, and a lot of the men, a lot of the lieutenants that were with them, that were leading them, practiced everything at night and knew what to do. And some of the other companies had some lieutenants and some other people that didn't participate as actively in some of that training. And particularly when they're trying to follow F Company, they get
Right.
lost and have to find them again and all that kind of stuff.
That's what I was
And
gonna ask you about from the book because that yeah, when they're approaching, someone says, "We lost F Company," and then someone else is like, "Again?" Like, what's going on with that? Like, who because we don't see F Company too much,
Mhm.
and there's not a lot of references to them. Like, did they just have a bad leader who was not as competent, or does it not say?
Great question. So what it says was that basically some of their officers weren't as well trained, and so they would move up, stop, and then hot foot it. They'd stop and then go real fast, and they weren't trained. They were supposed to be moving as a unit. You move along, and everybody's behind you, and you go at a certain pace. They were going and stopping rather
Mm.
than going at the same pace, and it helped them lose some of the elements of surprise as well on that.
Well, going around looking for him in the dark, I'd be like, "No, sir, I'm gonna sit here. We'll find him in the daylight," because everyone's jumpy and, like,
Mhm.
yeah, you're just as likely to get shot by one of your own guys as the Germans in that point. You're wandering around in the dark looking for people. It just yeah.
Absolutely. So you mentioned Doc Rowe and you mentioned the medics. My goodness, these guys are brave.
Oh my
I mean,
god. Yeah, and running out. I know they don't get shot at always, but there's so much fire coming, to run out in the middle of the street and, help people. Uh, yeah, that's just crazy.
the other
But,
brave men that nobody talks about really is the chaplains.
mhm.
So we saw the chaplain giving last rites to a couple of guys, and you see the fire around him, and the guys are looking at him like, "Man, that's crazy. I couldn't do that."
Right, right. Yeah, SP4H says the problem with being a sniper is that after a couple of shots, just about everyone knows where you're at. Yeah, I
Mhm.
guess so. I wasn't thinking about that. I guess you have to keep moving. Find
Yeah.
another spot to get located. Uh,
Well, there's some good. I mean, snipers are interesting, and they're interesting breed. I mean, you see it in Saving Private Ryan where he's up high. But you have Enemy at the Gates. I don't know if you've ever seen
yeah,
that movie, Heather,
mhm, yeah,
with the two snipers, and
yeah,
it
I like
shows
that.
how they got to keep moving.
Mhm.
And the very end, he's like, "I'm going to reveal to the major where you are," and he stands up and gets shot, and then it
Mm.
reveals where the major is, so Basili can take him out. So interesting movie, but yeah, this was interesting combat and just fascinating how they took it. But they took it; it was very strategic. However, taking it is one thing, keeping it is another.
Well, it's
Uh,
it's another interesting thing too, right on the way in is they find the German soldier with the Edelweiss in his
mhm.
pocket, and they say that that's the mark of a true soldier, which, I think they kind of circle back to later, which is why I bring that up.
Yeah, Edelweiss, which grows in the northern Alps, which is hard to get, and I think that's really cool that they added that element to it because I thought that was really an interesting element that we'll talk about a little bit later on. But also, just wanted to let you know that the other cool thing about this is that these were German paratroopers as well that they were dealing with. So they're dealing with kind of their opposites. And I watched a thing on Bill Garnier reviewing questions from people about Band of Brothers and everything else. And somebody had asked him, "Hey, did you ever meet your German counterparts in battle?" And he's like, "Sure did. Carentan, we whipped their asses." So it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, no, 2104 dog faces movement at night with a large formation is tough, and losing contact is common. Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Um, and he said that is mainly used by German mountain troopers more
Right.
so than paratroopers. But
Yeah, no, I believe that. I just think they were trying to use that in this episode. It's as kind of like a symbol, because when Blythe takes it later, it's a little bit symbolic of him kind of changing his character.
Mhm.
So I don't know how accurate it really is, if that happened or not, or if it's even in this situation, but I feel like they use that as just a symbolic point for him, and so they introduce it early in the episode. It's more of a character development thing than a real life reflection.
Yeah, apparently it's a favorite of former German naval commanders, but we won't get into that.
Hmm,
They
interesting,
sometimes sing about it, but
interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of Edelweiss songs.
okay, I'm joking with the Sound of Music there, but anyway, they did get up top, and this is the Germans retreating from the town, and they had a machine gun on them. I thought this was a cool shot. Um, okay, so it's later on at night, and one of the things the book talks about tremendously is he said the worst thing about this, worse than anything else, was the mosquitoes, and they said the mosquitoes were just horrendous, especially at night. And so marching outside of Carentan to get positioned. So what happened is they grouped everything there. They took the town, and you had E Company, uh, F Company and D Company all come out and place them strategically outside of Carentan to defend the town. E Company was on the kind of, I think, the right flank. F Company was in the middle, and D Company was over on the left. And so that's where they were headed towards more of a field
So,
area. Go
like,
ahead.
weren't the fields were flooded? I don't know if they were flooded from weather or they flooded them on purpose or some there was something about the fields flooded, which would make sense
Mhm.
why there's so many mosquitoes, right? If you've
Yeah, the
got
weather.
all the
Yep.
water there,
Yep.
stand lot of standing water in the
Mhm.
fields.
Yeah, and the Germans also flooded some of those areas as well.
Yeah.
Because what they did was they took out several strategic bridges that were also kind of dams as well. And so
Okay.
you had canals and stuff like that. And so it flooded over here. And so what Easy Company and the men are doing is they're going to take the higher ground outside of Carentan, um, and basically, defend it because it's easier to defend a higher ground. 2104 Dogface is also mentioning it's to hinder the drop zones for paratroopers as well.
Mm,
Um,
makes sense. It
so
looks miserable, man. All these holes that they're sitting in are just muddy messes.
yeah, they're digging in foxholes, and so you have them digging into foxholes, and this is an interesting point where Blythe runs into the dead German paratrooper, and he gets scared, and Winters is like, "Hey, did you find F Company?" He said, "Yeah, up there," and then Spears comes in, and we talk a little bit about Spears here, and we forgot to mention him a little bit before, but you want to talk about the Spears story and what he does since you mentioned it a little bit earlier?
Well, yeah, I've been talking about before that Spears has this kind of legend about him growing and he's just kind of a hard ass. But what he tells Blythe, I think, is interesting. Basically saying, we're all scared, but you're still scared because you have hope. And once you realize that you're dead already, you can just become more effective and not just only like yourself eliminating the Frieza, but that basically you're just an instrument of war, just like anything else, like a gun or a tank or a bullet. You're just an instrument of warfare. You don't have any feelings, any remorse. You're just going on doing your job, which
Yeah.
it's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, and I left out the part where right after Carentan, before they march into this other area, this defensive position, Blythe was in the hospital. Winters had to go because he was slightly injured on a ricochet. That was an interesting scene. Do you remember that scene, Heather?
Oh, where Winters is? Yeah, on the Ricochet. So they're in the town in Carentan, and this was hilarious, right? Because you've got the senior military officers going, "Is it safe to cross?" Like is the excuse we're trying to move wounded as he runs across the street, and Winters is like, "Oh yeah, it's perfectly safe," and then gets shot. Like I think it's just a ricochet bullet, right? He
Yeah, it
gets
is.
in the
It's
leg.
ricochet.
Yeah, so funny. Right after that instance.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, what happens is he goes to the station and we see Doc Rowe and he gets some shrapnel taken out of his leg and stuff like that. And he runs into Blythe and Blythe has blindness. And basically he can't see. It's basically his fears have just succumbed and he can't see anything. And then Winters kind of talks to him, encourages him, basically tells him, hey, stay here, take care of what you need to take care of. And he gets the talking to he needs to, and he's like, I can see, I think I'm gonna be okay. And that's kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, is that, you know, fear can cause you to freeze up and hold everything inside. And sometimes just talking through something with somebody can help you tremendously, as it helped Blythe here. And it helped him to kind of overcome his fear in the moment and to rejoin the group.
Right, where Winters is kind of just saying, "Yeah, okay, just" he's basically kinda listening, telling him, "Yeah, it's okay," understanding, and not really I mean, he doesn't say a whole lot, it's just being there.
Yeah. So yeah, 2104 Dogface says that Winters was talking about that, but he was too drunk to recall what Winters was saying. That's funny.
Yeah,
Um, I'd heard Winters talk about that, and he said, sometimes the men just needed encouragement, and you've got to, as a leader, be able to recognize, uh, you're gonna encourage or you're gonna order. You're gonna be, kick him in the butt. You're gonna, build him up, and you see Winters having to do different things with that here. So
right.
right. So they get into their foxholes, and you have another incident that happens with Floyd and Smith, that I don't have pictures of, but basically, so they're pinned down in these foxholes, and they're in there, and they're one guy rests for a couple hours, another guy goes on patrol, and so Floyd was coming back to his foxhole, and Smith was sleeping, and Floyd had put on a poncho that he found from a German, because it was still kind of wet and yucky and,
Right.
and rainy. And he it explains it better in the book because he looks almost like a German. He wakes up Smith, who's in a deep sleep because it's his turn to come on duty. And Smith hears Floyd, but sees a German. He goes after him and he knifes him. Fortunately, they stop him and Floyd lives through the experience. But crazy thing to happen in the
Yeah,
foxhole.
but I'm
Uh,
surprised that it doesn't happen more often they're out there at night,
mhm.
um, and the guy yeah, when you're woken up just surprised from a sleep like that,
Mhm.
it's not surprising that that doesn't happen more.
Oh,
But yeah, I
yeah,
guess
especially
they
deep
must
sleep.
have hit him in a spot that wasn't like a a crucial organ or something that they
Yeah.
or it wasn't that deep, I don't know,
Mhm.
because he seems like he was okay later at the end of the episode, so
Yep. And so, in the night you're introduced to Martin, um, who, basically is like, "Hey, Blythe, you want some water?" He's making sure his men are okay. He's a good guy. He's like, "Hey, what's that?" And he goes, "Go check out the racket." Um,
yeah,
so we see some of that in here.
Martin seems like a pretty calm, laid back kinda guy.
Mhm. Yeah, he and Bill, after this, when they get back to England, they have passes and they go to Edinburgh and they get tattoos together. So he and Bill Garnier were good friends. Um, yeah, 2104 Dogface says, yeah, those German pouches would keep you warm and dry, but the risk is wearing them at night, especially on a patrol. So,
Yeah.
mm,
Well,
so
yeah, I can see you'd wanna take that because the Germans probably had the right gear for the elements.
mhm.
They parachuted in and, don't have that much with them. So, yeah, if you could find some rain gear, I'd take it, but, a little tough at night, right?
Yeah. All right. So the next day, the next morning, the Germans attack. And so what happened was Dog Company retreated, unlike what they were supposed to do. Or no, F Company retreated like they weren't supposed to do. Their CO was canned. Dog Company followed them because they were on the other side. So you have E over here on the right, F in the middle, and D on this side. So F goes, oh, F this. We got German tanks coming. We're leaving.
Yeah,
And
run.
and D Company's over here going, why is F leaving? Let's go. Let's get out of here. And then F Company retreats. So it's just E Company defending this territory right here. And they stay the course because they've got the men trained and stuff. And so they got machine guns against the tank. And then we see what I think is a really cool part with Welsh. And I forget the other guy's name, but Heather, what do you think of this scene?
Yeah, I love this scene too with Welsh. I mean, you could really see him get a lot of good stuff from him in this, where the tank is coming like right towards him. It's like, we're too close, we're too close. The other guy's like, you're gonna get me killed, and he's like trying to help him aim it. I think they take a couple of shots. The one doesn't look like it hits in the right. You got to hit like under where it's more susceptible. So then
Yeah.
they finally get one off, but man, they take some really close, like near misses there, right? The trees get taken out behind them from the tank, and yeah, they finally hit it underneath and destroy it. But um, that had to be some serious adrenaline right there. Sitting there with the bazooka, taking on a tank is crazy.
I don't know if I could hold that bazooka straight. Oh my
That's why
gosh. That was
Like,
unnerving.
Welsh is trying to, like, help him aim it, and because 'cause he's got it on his shoulder, right? He's behind him, like, trying to help him get it in the right direction.
Yeah. And this really did happen.
Yeah.
The strategic thing. So the tank so this is like the tank. It's coming over a hedge grove, and that it exposes its bottom, and they
Right.
blow it up, and it just explodes. It causes a fire formation. And the thing about it was the other tanks would. So it's so muddy in there, and if you get one tank over a hedge grove, then the other tanks can follow, and they can uh, fan out in formation and take everything out. Well, taking out that lead tank was key because it really stopped the other tanks from going over the hedgerow. They were spread out, and
Mm,
they didn't know what they were doing. And
right.
then you get the firefights, and then Dog and Fox Company finally re-engage. And guess who else engages?
Blythe too, right? Because
Yes,
he's
Blythe
rendered.
does too. And here's kind of the tank being taken out. And then we have our Shermans that are coming in too. But you have Winters yelling at Blythe, "Fire your weapon, Blythe!"
Yeah, that's great when he's just standing up, right? He's again
Yeah,
not taking cover, standing
yeah,
up, trying to encourage him, and it does help him, right? Because once he starts taking action, once he starts firing, it kind of
mhm,
unfreezes him. Like he gets moving, and it kind of snaps him out of it a little bit. He
mhm.
ends up killing the one German with the Edelweiss, I think, which is kind of symbolic of a turning point for him in the character that they created. I'm not going to say that it's the real man, it's the character that they created for the show.
Yeah. And the Shermans show up. They take out some of the German positions, and the Germans retreat. And
So,
they go ahead.
did the Shermans come from, like, the beachhead invasions? Did they get
Mhm,
unloaded off the boats that came into the beaches, and now they're
mhm,
finally getting to this position?
mhm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Because so you have both beaches. So you have Utah and Omaha, and they're converging in Carentan, and then they're fanning out. And so you've got all this equipment, everything coming up together, and then that has to move. I mean, it's massive assembly and then move forward. So you really couldn't move the armored division as quickly as you'd want to.
Yeah, I can
Um,
imagine. But they get here just in time, right?
yeah,
Saved by the cavalry moment here for sure.
yeah. 2104 Dogface says, so if I remember, it was a Panzer tank in the series. They used an assault gun, which wasn't that area during the battle. Yeah. I don't know what type of tanks the Germans had in here. I can't remember. It may say so in the book, but basically taking him out was just key to doing that. And then the armor division moved up and was able to do that. It's just crazy everything that happened. And yeah, we see Blythe take out the one German, then he goes and he finds where he died and sees the Edelweiss on him. So
Yeah, puts it in his own pocket, and then he kind of gets delusions of grandeur after that, I think, right?
yeah, yeah, he finally kind of snaps out of it and gets over kind of his fear. Um, so the next part of this, the last part of it, was a kind of a farmhouse that they needed to check out, and they thought it was kind of the German command post that they were still defending. And Blythe does the thing; he takes the lead. And you want to talk about what happens?
Yeah, I will mention, just quickly first, I love, there's a little conversation between Welsh and, Nix, where, Welsh still has his reserve chute, in his backpack,
Mm-hmm.
and Nix is like, "I can't believe, you're carrying that around," and Welsh is like, "Well, because of rationing, he's gonna give it to his fiancée, basically, because it's made of silk, and she can
Mm-hmm.
make a wedding dress out of it," and, Nix is kinda laughing, it's like, "I can't believe, that," and Welsh says, "What, you can't believe I'm that sentimental?" And Nix is like, says, "No, I can't believe you think you're gonna make it back to England." And it just goes back to that theme again, right, of you're assuming that you're dead already, you're not thinking ahead, like, you're gonna make it back home. And I thought that that was an interesting, kind of a funny way to get back onto that topic, which is basically, the theme of the whole episode. But, yeah, he, asks for volunteers, gets Blythe, says he's gonna take point, and I think another interesting thing too is this is now quite a while after these 2 battles, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
Carentan was, like, D-Day +6,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's what, like, +20 maybe?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
I'm not sure if there was more fighting in between or just moving, they're advancing forward, exactly what's happened in that interim time, but quite a bit of time has passed now since this battle here. Um, and, yeah, Blythe takes point and just gets a random, sniper shot, like, right before they're gonna get pulled off the line and sent back home, which is also tragic.
Yep. And I've got the part in the book. So really, so what happened was there's a farmhouse and they sent patrols over there to go get it. And so Nick said to Winters, "Hey, we need a patrol to go do that." No one volunteered at first, and then Garnier was nominated to lead the patrol. So Garnier got the briefing from Nixon, who gave him a map showing all the hedgerows and the cluster of farm buildings that seemed to be German command posts, almost a kilometer away. Garnier, Private Blythe, and Joseph Lizinski of Erie, Pennsylvania, and 2 others set out. Using the hedgerows for concealment, they moved forward. Blythe was at the point. He reached the last hedgerow leading to the farm building. A German sniper put a bullet in his neck. "Get the hell out of there," Garnier shouted as pistols fell back. German machine pistols opened up. When the patrol got back to the easy lines, the company's machine guns answered the fire.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that was the farmhouse, and Blythe got hit in the neck. And then so we'll see kind of the hospital scene with him in it. And there he is with the neck. And so what had happened is, well, first of all, you mentioned the reserve chute. So 2104 Dogface mentions in the chat that Wild Bill kept his reserve chute. Also, sadly, it was taken from his home and sold. Oh, that's a
Mm,
bummer.
that's sad.
That's awful. That's
Yeah,
sad. I mean, nobody should take from these men. That's just
yeah,
awful. But Blythe had been hit in the neck shoulder area, and it wasn't quite like they portrayed here, but it was a little bit different. And he spent time in England, and they shipped him back to the States to recover. None of the men really heard from Blythe or really talked to him for a while since then. And so a lot of people thought he had died, and
yeah.
he didn't, in fact, die. And what had happened is that he healed from his wounds. And by the time he was ready to rejoin everybody, the war was already over. That's how long it took him to heal because
I
it was
can
just so much.
imagine. I mean, a neck wound like that with so many large arteries, you're not gonna
Yeah,
be able to just go right back into battle, you're gonna have to take some time.
yeah. So he he recovered, actually got married, had kids, and then stayed in the army. And this is what happened to Blythe. So, folks, Blythe actually fought in Korea, and he was a paratrooper. And guess what? He jumped in Korea. And
Wow.
Winters describes this. He jumped in Korea, and where his landing zone was right in the middle of a unit of Chinese
Oh my
soldiers.
god.
And so
Wow.
he fought his way out of that, and he earned himself both a Silver Star and a Bronze Star. So he got a
Wow.
Silver Star, a Bronze Star, and a Purple Heart. And the sad part about Blythe's life is that I think he did make it back to one of the Easy Company reunions. They say he did. I don't know if that's a fact, but what had happened was there was a kind of a reunion or a reenactment of Bastogne, and he went to be with the guys there, and he got sick, and then he died overseas while in the army, and it was 1967 when he actually passed away. Um, the sad and tragic part was hearing about his son talk about it. Um, a lot of these guys, unfortunately, struggled with different things, and one of his things that he struggled with was alcohol.
Mm,
And his son said that really the alcohol really helped aid that sickness, and
right.
him being an alcoholic really hurt him. And that's sad too. I mean, gosh, you hate to hear that about him, but Blythe did live through this. He was a distinguished officer, the real Blythe, very much a hero. Purple Heart, Silver Star, Bronze Star,
Right.
did his duty. So, 2104 Dogface has mentioned a couple other things. He says many items were stolen from company vets and sold, which is a sad thing. If the vets themselves want to sell those things, that's great, but it's sad if somebody stole them and did that. And then he mentioned something else that he talked with Bill about Blythe and said they all honestly thought he died, and no one had heard from him after the evac, and he didn't attend any reunions. Bill was kicking himself for not knowing.
Oh, I'm
So,
sure. Yeah.
so
It's
um,
sad. I mean, to me, though, the worst thing about this episode, I know people bring up that it says that he died, and so that's always like needs a correction. But to me, the worst part is more how he's portrayed
mhm,
than than the fact that they missed that he was still alive. I mean, the man obviously went on to fight in other wars, was awarded other medals for bravery and service, and it was seems like that he was a really good soldier, and so portraying him in the beginning like he's just a complete moron is what I have a problem with. I really hate the way that they make him look versus, having a problem freezing and then overcoming it was enough of a story. They didn't have to portray him as just this like complete in a daze, kind of clueless way. I really to me that I really don't like that about the episode is how they make him look.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, So it wraps up with the Easy Company going back to Aberdeen, England. And all right, so here's a little bit more about this, and we'll get into this part because we see it in this episode. Uh, so the motorcycle was in Normandy, and they took a boat back, and so one of the guys was real good at taking stuff from regiment, and he took the motorcycle. And they hid the motorcycle, and they briefed the Navy guys about it, um, and they took the motorcycle and raced it onto the ship as the last thing on the ship before they sailed back to England, which is
Yeah.
cool. And then I can't remember the name of the guy who stole it, but he and Malarkey were in it when everybody else took the train back to Aberdeen when they got back to England.
Yeah,
So,
I love that joyride in the motorcycle. I mean, they have the near miss there with the truck, but I mean,
yeah,
to me, it just shows like the pure joy of being alive. A motorcycle ride before everything that they had gone through, you could easily just take it for granted, right? But you could just tell, like, just how elated they are, just like, "Woo, we're back in England, we survived." It's just, it's such a cool moment. And then
Oh, so it was yeah,
back
it was
there where they get the poem about the bayonet, incident is hilarious too.
yeah, it was Moore and Malarkey that did it. Yeah, let's see. Yep, Private Moore pulled one last raid. So, all right, so I'll read part of this. So Moore was kind of the one that was raiding all the regiment. He stole uh, fruit cocktail and peaches as well. Moore pulled one last raid on the vast supply dump. He broke into the main mortar pool and stole a motorcycle, complete with sidecar. He hid it behind a sand dune and asked Captain Winters if he could pull it up to the LST and take it back to England. Up to you, Winters replied, because Winters really didn't care. The next day, the company marched up the ramp of the gigantic LST. Moore moved the motorcycle up the inland side of the forward dune. He arranged with Malarkey for a hand signal when everyone was aboard. It was time to go. Malarkey tipped off the Navy personnel. At the proper moment, standing on the ramp, Malarkey gave the signal and Moore came roaring over the dune and up the ramp. On the LST, the skipper said to Welsh, "Lieutenant, what would your men like to have? Chicken or steak or ice cream or eggs?" Sailing on the convoy, LST got back to the Southampton the night of the July 12th. The next morning, a train took them, except for Moore and Malarkey, who rode the motorcycle to Aberdeen. It was wonderful to be back. When it's remembered, everyone was glad to see us. It was just like going home
Yeah,
for them.
great.
So
These are great scenes back in England.
yeah, and 2104 Dogface mentions the poem. They mentioned the poem in this, and yeah, the wording of it was lost, but I love the poem. It's like uh, hearing Floyd, but seeing Jerry. Uh,
Yeah, that was so funny.
yeah,
This is a
and,
great scene in here.
yeah, and it kind of leads into the next episode. We see some of the replacements here, and there is Babe Heffron, who we find out is from Philly, and he and Garnier become close friends with this. And we'll find some more about Heffron uh, later on as we go. So he
Yeah,
was one of the key guys here
one of the
too.
newer
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, this is also in this scene where Lipton comes in and he's like, "We're heading back to France," and to say we won't be returning to England. And I mean, always that gets me where he says, "Make sure you've made out your wills," is just like a sobering moment. But the fact that they know they're not returning to England this time, I find interesting, right? Because the
Mhm.
plan in the first invasion was that they would parachute in, establish this area where they could link up from the two beachheads. And then I think the plan was always to pull them off the line. But
Mhm.
now they're assuming, okay, we're going to parachute into Europe and they're not coming back to England. Like, I just wonder what the long term they think that they're just going to be in Europe then, or are there bases that they can be pulled off to in Europe now at this point to where they don't need to go back to England?
Okay, so scuttlebutt from the book. So one of the generals really he's like, okay, are there any media present? This is not on record, but they were thinking that they could be in Berlin by Christmas. And so as
Yeah,
part of
one
that,
guy I know one guy says that, but I thought that was kind of a joke. That's odd that
yeah,
they really thought that.
Bradley talked to Winters and some of those guys, and he was the one that said that,
Wow.
according to the book. And so the other thing is that significant the promotion. So Malarkey became a sergeant, but also you mentioned Lipton. He became the master sergeant in the whole unit, and
Yep,
so
yep, which is
he's
good.
which is why he had to give the orders. Uh, Winters finally got promoted to captain, and then you have Welsh and a couple others that were promoted from second lieutenant to first lieutenant. So,
Yeah, it's nice you see all the promotions here, especially Malarkey to sergeant.
mhm,
And then God, that scene where Malarkey goes to get his laundry, I always find that so heartbreaking. Uh, it was a really, I think, creative way to kind of make the losses of the men, the original men, just really kind of hit home when
mhm.
she's saying, oh, and she starts reading all the names, like first with the lieutenant that was missing right away, their first lieutenant, but then all the other men, it kind of more than, I mean, because you see them obviously being killed in battle, and you can read the lines of how many were lost, but I always find this scene just kind of to be a tearjerker when you realize, right, like, do their families even know yet? Like, here's their belongings, they're not coming back, and I don't know, this scene always gets me.
Oh yeah, it's crazy, and she talks about all the men whose uniforms they had cleaned and stuff like that. And actually, they got brand new uniforms then, but um, it just it just is heart wrenching. I mean,
Yeah,
and he's there. How much he goes and he's going to pay for all these soldiers, and it's just it's sad. But so what happened in England? They were actually in England a lot longer than it portrays here. They were there for about a month or so. Um, when you had squad leaders like Bull Randleman who got promoted, they had new recruits that came in, and winners had to train them. So there was training going on, but also some of the guys got leave. And apparently, oh my goodness, some of the stuff with they talk about with the leave. Imagine these guys that are 18 to 20 years old in
I
London on their
yeah.
own on a pass. Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
can just imagine.
Yeah, so all kinds of crazy stuff happened, but yeah, it gets into the next episode, which is replacements. But you also had some of these guys talking about what they're going to do after the war and stuff, and so you had kind of a downtime for them to talk and to do this. And one of the most striking stories is about Lipton healing in his hands. Were still kind of hurt, and Malarkey and another soldier were making fun of him, calling him Crip, and he grabbed him by the necks and held him up, and he's like, "Stop it!
Wow,
Don't do that." I can't imagine that. I read that about Lipton. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can't imagine him doing that."
wow.
And one of the things is that he was all set when he got back to go back to college and play college football, and he
Oh,
didn't want his
wow.
hand, keeping him from being able to do that. And I'm like sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, what on earth?" Um, it also mentions that Malarkey spent some time in the hospital between some of these engagements, and he rejoined the guys back down south. But also, one of his one of the guys that he knew was actually the guy. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it's like Kowalski or something like that, who had three brothers who died in already in D-Day and World War
Mhm,
II, and his mom got three telegrams all
mhm.
at the same time saying his three brothers had been killed, and he was actually pulled aside and he went to say goodbye to Malarkey and some of the guys, and he was shipped back, and that's the basis for Saving Private Ryan.
Right, okay, interesting.
Yeah, so but yeah, I mean, gosh, it's crazy. 2104 Dogface, who knew some of these guys, said that Babe's daughter sold some of the items after they
Yeah,
passed away, which is sad.
that is
Um, he also mentions that the Nyland brothers, that's who it is, the Nyland brothers. Uh, yeah, it took place pre D Day. So,
yeah.
but yeah, it's interesting. Interesting that I didn't know that was a connection there, which is kind of cool,
Right.
kind of interesting. Um, so, I mean, as we wrap up, this episode, I think I thought there was some excellent cinematic techniques that they used. I love the way that they went from door to door, and it was really, you think about it, CGI was just coming into the picture during the time they did this. I see a lot of the film quality that was almost like a movie, almost like Saving Private Ryan. That's the quality of this TV show
Yeah.
back then, which I thought was just excellent. Um, but overall thoughts on this episode? I know we've mentioned that we didn't like how Blythe was portrayed.
Yeah, I will say too on the filming, right? Like back when this was done, this was kind of one of the first TV series and with HBO where you really started to get that high quality. Because I feel like in
Mhm.
the past, you could always tell easily by looking at something, whether it was a TV show or a movie. And this is one of the first where there's such a big leap in the quality for a television show. Um, and that kind of started a new trend, especially at HBO, for how TV was done, just as in terms of the quality of it too. So yeah, and the filming, I think a lot of this episode, great. The Carentan, battle and the taking of that, I mean, that the portrayal of that was very realistic, and also the counterattack after that. The 2 battle scenes are great. The ending is really great too. Back in England, you see the men who actually did make it all get promoted, and then these newer, younger guys coming in under them.
Mhm.
That's going to start off, and it makes a great break. Like the first 3 episodes are all kind of a story, and now we're like setting off kind of for like the middle part of the show.
Mhm.
That's that motion forward. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I like about this episode. I mean, to me, really, it's just the portrayal of blood that kind of brings it down.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one other thing we forgot to mention is the Percani taking the watch off the dead German that they passed to was kind of just hilarious.
Yeah,
Like,
just walks
dude,
by and just
really?
grabs it.
Yeah, he just grabs it. But you know, that's what those guys were doing.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
take
well,
souvenirs and stuff.
get souvenirs, yeah, for sure. I do find it interesting that they thought that the war would not take much longer. Um, and I'm not sure, maybe because they thought D-Day objectives had gone pretty well up to this point,
Mhm.
and based on progress, they think it's gonna continue, but I mean, obviously, uh, it's a lot probably a lot more difficult than what they expected.
Well, they allude to in the book that the other thing that was happening was Patton was on a tear, and that was
Mm,
helping too. They said it's just Patton with his armor division really they really thought that because of the way that he was moving so quickly that it would help end the war a lot quicker than it did. So
yeah, interesting.
yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I think this episode's good. I actually think it's one of the weaker episodes just because of the way they portrayed Blythe. But
Yep.
a weak episode on Band of Brothers is still like an 8.
Right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, most of the episodes are
exactly.
like 9 or 10 easily.
Yeah.
And this one's one of the weaker ones, but still think it's really good. And, you know, you get a lot to feel how the men were doing and what they were up to. So it's kind of cool. The next episode, we're going to meet some of the replacement characters and how they fit in with the company. Because I mean, they lost so many men in D-Day and in these battles.
Mm.
It was crazy.
Yeah, I remember at the end it said we're at 65. Was that
Mhm.
Easy Company or was that the larger group? It was Easy Company, right? Between
I think it was the
all
company. Yeah.
okay. And Easy Company had what, 4 platoons? Or 3?
Yes.
4.
4. Yes. Um, trying to see if I can find the numbers here. Give me a sec. I don't know if it's in the book here. Carentan and but if anybody has that, nope, I don't have the exact numbers on here, but I mean they lost several men, so that the replacements were no joke. But we're going to get into that and get the men talking about the replacements in the next episode. But they lost a significant amount.
Mm.
You know, he said if you can find a copy of John Pomerano HQ 501st wire section has a book down to the wire, has one vet who hung out with them. So there there are several books on this. I mean, Ambrose has the main one. I know Bill Garnier wrote one. I know a couple of the other guys wrote one. We mentioned Webster's book that like really kind of spurred a lot of this on last week, and really Webster's in this book talking about all the replacements and everybody that came back with it as well. So, all right, well that wraps up this episode. You know, in a couple weeks we'll do episode 4. Heather, you got anything to plug that you want to talk about?
I do not. I'll let you do the plugging.
Okay, so next up on my channel next weekend, a little bit later than this time. We won't do it so early because there's a football game in about an hour and a half. But we will finish up the 1980s with 1989, top 40 from 1989. Here we're getting into some interesting music. You start to see a shift from the 80s to the 90s and the appearance of boy bands,
Yeah.
which some of us will have some choice words about that. Asian Pepsi One couldn't join us today, but she'll be on the panel, and I'm sure she'll have a lot to say about boy bands and about the music that she just loves from 1989.
Oh,
As
sure.
you could tell, later 80s is not one of her favorites. And if you've never heard an Agent Pepsi One rant, you're missing a whole lot. She is hilarious. But we got that. And then in 2 weeks, we'll finish up February with episode 4, where we'll meet and really talk about another member of E Company. Heather, do you know who's the featured person in episode 4?
Oh, I don't. I've stopped
Oh,
myself.
Randleman.
Oh, Bill Randleman. Okay, yes.
Yeah,
I
this
I
is
I only watch it again. I rewatch it right before we do it instead of because I always want to like I watch it, I want to keep watching it, and if I don't cut myself off, I'll watch like the whole series all the way through. So I haven't seen it. I'm gonna for I don't know, probably a year. So I'll watch it again before we talk about it. But yeah, I love Bill Randleman.
yeah,
Great.
he's great. He's great, and the actor that plays him is just fantastic. So we're going to talk about him in a couple weeks when we do episode 4.
Yeah,
But
great.
that's all we got. And also, folks, if you like pop culture, Doomcock's channel, we're both on that channel as well. Pop culture breakdowns coming up on Wednesday, and we're talking about Moonstruck because it's Valentine's Day coming up when we're filming this. So we've
Yeah,
got that
awesome.
movie coming up, and Friday
Yeah,
Night Frolics on Doomcock's channel as well. Support him. But anyway, that's all we have. We'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Thanks for
great.
watching.
Thank you. Bye.
All right.